Okay, my name is Bill Roberts, and I first got interested in the idea of flying, real interested, when I was just out of college, and I went up to Estes Park with some friends, and we were walking down a trail, and here comes a TV-2, which is an Air Force jet, and it comes zooming through the canyon, and it goes up and does about 3 rolls, and I thought, my gosh, how would it be to do something like that? And didn't think about it too much more. I was raised over in Grand Junction, and we had an airport, not Moffett Field, but Walker Field, that would have military planes come into it once in a while. And all of us kids would run out there to see if we could see a P-51 or a P-38 or whatever it was. And we used to take cotton rags for the maintenance crews out at Walker to use, and they would give us a free flight in a Piper Cub. So always interested in flying, never thought seriously about whether you would do it or not, but it was always a fascination. I graduated from Central High School and went to Mesa College and then Colorado State College, where I majored in physical education at first, had a minor in science, and wanted to coach wrestling and baseball. And at about that time, I graduated in 1954. Korean War was still going on, and we were about ready to be drafted. So I took a teaching job in the Grand Junction system, and had only taught about 2 months, and I thought I better check my draft status. Went down to the draft board and said, how am I doing? And they said, oh, you're going next month. And I thought, oh, I guess I better make up my mind what I want to do. And I thought, well, gee, what's the best? And I thought, the best is naval aviation. And so I took the test and passed, and I went down, and first I had to take, they had to take measurements. You had to be 5'6" tall, and I was 5'6" tall, because another fellow was there. He was 5'5"3/4", and they wouldn't let him through. So I took all the tests, and sure enough, I was ready to go, and I was taken in October 28th. And I went to Pensacola, drove down there, and ran into people I knew right away that I had met in high school and actually played against in high school. So it was kind of fun, but we had 16 weeks of pre-flight, and during that time we were harassed and instructed by Marine instructors, and we took all kinds of courses, mainly navigation, weather, aerology, and military bearing, that kind of thing. And we were, under a situation where you were kind of afraid whoever you met, because you could get into trouble in all sorts of ways. But the Marine sergeants were the ones that really put fear in our lives, because they were our military drill instructors. And I'll never forget the first inspection we had in our bunk room. We were kind of scared because everything had to be perfect. And these Marines were all 6'4", and they all had big, heavy voices, and they hated cadets. I mean, they really hated us. And so I heard the Marine go into the next room, and Cadet Cully was reporting for that room, and he reported, Cadet Cully, room so-and-so ready for inspection. And the Marine was looking at Cully, and Cully had a button unbuttoned on his shirt. And the Marine says, Cully, button that button. Well, Cully was looking at the Marine's shirt where there was a button unbuttoned. So naturally what he did is he started to button the Marine's shirt, and it was like an atomic bomb going on off next door. We were scared before, but when that happened, we were really shook up. And well, we made it through that. I mean, you always stuffed everything that was not supposed to be there in your laundry bag that was hanging on a door. So what the Marines like to do, they knew that. They'd grab that laundry bag and start hitting you over the head with it. And it was really fun and interesting. And after the 16 weeks, you know, you really felt good. So first assignment after getting through pre-flight was Whiting Field, where you took primary. And I was introduced to my instructor, Lieutenant Dolan, and I was a kind of a naive young guy at the time, even for my age, and I didn't drink. And that seemed to be offensive to some of the naval officers that I met, and I couldn't quite understand that. I thought they were some kind of super gods, you know, flying airplanes. But he says, well, Roberts, he says, we're going to outdrink and outfly every other cadet in the whole darn place. And I thought, oh, well, that's great. I don't drink, you know. I'm going to be popular with him. Well, we made it through, and I got through Whiting Field, and after being in the Navy for 10 months, by that time I was at Sofley Field, where we were doing formation and some gunnery and bombing practice. They institute a new program in the Navy called the Aviation Officer Candidate. And what that was that if you had a degree in college, when you got through pre-flight, you were commissioned. So all my friends who were cadets, and some who were college graduates too, but cadets, saw all of the guys with degrees go out on a lawn one day, and they had a little band, and they, you know, made us officers. So we moved out of the cadet barracks into the officers' barracks, and they still have that aviation officer candidate program. You don't have to go through NROTC, and I don't think they have a 2-year college cadet thing anymore at all. So training, you know, very intense, pretty interesting. You start out in an airplane called an SNJ. It's a fairly high-performance propeller plane, looks like an old dive bomber. And what was nice about it for a tall guy was that you were very comfortable. For a short guy like me, I had to have 4 back pads in order to reach the pedals. And by the time I did that, I was clear on the edge of the seat, and I had to have the seat all the way down, so I couldn't hardly see out of the windows. And so by the time I had taxied out to take off, I almost had it down then, because I couldn't, you know, it was just a very uncomfortable cockpit. But a lot of fun to fly once you know, got your solo. And from the SNJ, when we finally finished the Whiting Field and then Sofley Field, where we did our gunnery and bombing, we went to Corey Field and got into T-28s, which is a high-performance tricycle landing gear trainer, and a lot of fun to fly. The seat moved up and down with a button, and I could see out of it, and I could be comfortable, and we just had 30 hours of instrument flying in the T-28. It's just easy to make dumb mistakes, and I was talking about Tom Reese, who he went out to take off when he was on his first solo at Whiting Field, and he couldn't find a runway. So he got it down, and he had to spend a whole hop where he was just taxiing around the field so he could become a little bit better acquainted with it. At that time, you were asked to select or to choose what you would like to do, whether it be multi-engine or jets or attack or propellers. And of course, most of the guys that had any sense at all chose jets because they're the most fun. And I asked for the West Coast, and I looked to see what naval air stations there were there. I asked for Moffett Field, California, and sure enough, I got exactly what I wanted. I don't know why, but I got exactly what I wanted, and so there on September 1955, my mother came down to Corpus Christi, where we were given our wings, and that was a big day in my life. And I reported to Moffett Field, VA 156. The squadron had F-9, F-6s at the time, and we were designated as an attack squadron, and our mission would be to carry an atomic bomb. Well, I went in and met my commanding officer, Jack Fruin, and I looked at him, and I had looked down. I remembered when I enlisted, you had to be 5'6" and he was 5'2" at the most, but he was a big man, other than his height, and he made it through just fine. In fact, he was the only one at that time that had bailed out of a jet and survived. They didn't have an ejection seat. It was a Banshee. But so we trained in F-9, F-6s for this attack mission, and lo and behold, they were bringing out a new airplane, F-11F. It's the first supersonic plane the Navy had. And boy, we were lucky. We were the first squadron, F-11F Tiger, and it was barely supersonic. And interesting thing about it is they tested the airframe with two engines. One was the J-65, that's the one that we had, and it had about 7,000 pounds of thrust. And they put in also a J-79, which is the same engine that the F-104 had. And with the J-79, that plane was a Mach 2 airplane, but it only stayed up in the air about 45 minutes, so they finally wound up putting in the J-65. So we were just over Mach 1 and wanting to go faster. That's the way that airplane was. It was a very solid airplane. You could fly it at any speed, as fast as it would go, an afterburner, at any altitude. Now, at the same time, the Navy had the F-8U coming out. It's a Crusader. It had J-57 engine, the same engine as the F-100. And it was a 1.8 Mach airplane. That's about 1,200 miles an hour. And the F-100 that the Air Force had, that had J-57, it was about a 1.2 Mach. So the F-8 was a very high-performing airplane. And there were all kinds of new airplanes coming out at that time. At Moffett Field, we had F-4Ds, we had F-4U, we had F-4Ds, we had F-8Us, we had F-11Fs, we had A-4s, we had F-3Hs. It was really a wide mixture of new planes coming out, and so there were quite a few accidents. Matter of fact, I had one day there that was kind of interesting. We were trying refueling with the F-11F. And I went up with Bob Foster, my good friend and my section leader, and we were refueling off of a turboprop, a big 4-engine turboprop. And we were having a hard time getting hooked in, because as we would just start to hook in with our nozzle, with our probe, the probe would disappear down below the airplane. And so we were going up and down and backing off and trying to figure it out. And all of a sudden, with mine, as I went in, my airplane just went into a flip. I went right over Foster, and I could look at him eyeball to eyeball, and went into a spin. This was at 22,000 feet. And this didn't shake me up really too much, because in our tactics hops, we would stall out every now and then, go into spins, and usually if you just leave the airplane alone, it'll fly out of them, and forward stick, opposite aileron, and you come out of it. Well, this airplane didn't respond no matter what I did. I took my hands off, and it just kept spinning. And if we went through 10,000 feet out of control, we were supposed to eject. So I was at 8,000 feet, and he says, "Eject, Bill, eject." And so I ejected. And oh, it was kind of interesting experience. You go flying out of there, and the time slows down immediately. And I can remember everything second by second, how my helmet comes off, how I get whacked in the face with my oxygen mask, and you roll out, and then pretty soon the parachute opens, and you think, I'm not falling, I'm just hanging here. And then you realize pretty soon that you're actually descending. And so I did descend. I landed in the ocean out about 10 miles from San Francisco, and it seemed like everybody I knew in the world was up in the air that day looking at me, and they couldn't see me because there was a low layer of clouds. And I got picked up by a helicopter and taken to a Marine hospital in San Francisco. And they looked at me, and one of the Marine doctors patched up my back of my head. I had a little cut back there, and he gave me some tender, loving care. I was supposed to pitch in a softball game that day, and they really gave me a bad time because I did that. But so after a while, they say, well, we're going to transfer you to a Navy hospital. Okay. So they did. And by the way, my helmet was returned. A fishing boat found it and brought it back to me. And anyway, I go into the Navy hospital, and the Navy doctor says, "Who sewed up this cut?" I said, "Oh, it was a Marine over in the Marine hospital." And he says, "It's no good." And he pulls out the stitches, and he does it again. So that's part of the fun of being in the military, that they take some options with you every now and then.
Well, I hate to interrupt because it's going along so smoothly, but was this pilot error that caused your plane to spin out, or what was it all about?
They had, of course, have an accident investigation, and the final result was that pilot error, unable to recover from a spin. But the upshot of it is that this was a new airplane for Grumman, so they tested it back at the Grumman factory, and the test pilot went in to a spin. He got it into a spin at 25,000 feet. Our probe stuck out from the side. Our refueling probe stuck out from the side of the nose, and it gave it a kind of a funny characteristic, we thought. But he spun for, let's see, he went in at 25,000, he got it out at 12,000. So he spun 13,000 feet before he got it under control, and they said the way he got it, his procedure was the same as you do, forward stick and opposite aileron. And so it was kind of a mystery as to why it wouldn't come out. And I got to explain this to a number of people, but it didn't seem to, be a real bad mark on my record or anything like that. And, a lot of accidents were happening in those days because of all the new airplanes that were coming out. And so I got through that okay, and it wasn't too long before we finished our training. Another side note on this is we had when I ejected, you unbuckle your leg straps and then your chest straps so that when you hit the water, you can get rid of the parachute. Otherwise, some people get tangled up in their parachute and they drown. And so I was concerned about that. So that was a procedure I went through, and it worked fine. I was out in the raft for a while, and a helicopter picked me up. But we had another pilot that had a flame out, and this was he had a flame out. It was later in my time in the service. We were out on the ship at the time, and he ejected, and he remembered my debriefing, and so he hadn't tightened his straps very good, and when he unbuckled his leg straps, he fell, and he almost fell out of his parachute, and he had to hang on until he hit the water, and he was in shock for a couple of days. They had a destroyer pick him up, and we couldn't figure out why he hadn't come back to our ship. And he said, well, when he finally told somebody, it was that he almost fell out of the parachute. So things like that happen. I had a lot of good and bad experiences, and one of the worst was that I was flying down to Miramar with Bill Ober, who I had done a number of flights with. In fact, I buzzed my mother on our farm over by Grand Junction with Bill. That was a little bit earlier. And he had a throttle stick on him at 100%. And I was his wingman, and he was going around and around the field trying to slow it down. He had the speed brakes out and the wheels down, and he couldn't get it slowed down. And so he was talking to our flight leader who had landed, and the flight leader said, well, just shut off the master fuel. And so Bill decided to do that, and he shut off the master fuel switch and then decided to come into the runway. Well, it didn't slow down, and he went over the end of the runway 220 miles an hour, and he tried to force the airplane onto the runway so he could pick up the they had a cable across at the end of the runway, which he would have been able to pick up with his tail hook. And the plane started just hopping up and down, and finally he rolled it up in a big ball, and it killed him. And that was one day, and the next hop I had was on a carrier qualifications with Dave Goodall, who was an experienced jet pilot. And the deck was pitching pretty bad. And So we were having a hard time getting aboard, and the F-11F had a long nose, and you could, as you turned in, the mirror on the ship was usually is on the left, so you can see it all the way around. But that mirror was out, and so we were having to use the mirror on the right. And you use the mirror to align your flight or your glide path on landing. And Dave was having a hard time, I was having a hard time, and he finally decided that he was going to land, I guess, so he kind of forces it down. And this is just a week after and the first hop after I had been with Bill Ober when he crashed. And Dave, he hit the deck too hard and knocked off his wheels and skidded up the deck and took 3 other airplanes out and 2 plane captains that were killed. So I had 2 flights in a row where the person I was flying with were killed. So it was kind of a dangerous business. I finally made it back aboard, and I had a lot of cheers, and it was kind of a sad situation. They had to clear off the deck, and we didn't have enough fuel to go to land on land or anything, so I had to get aboard.
It's tough enough to land just a normal carrier landing. What did it do to you to have to come in after those incidents?
Well, you get a little numb, and you seem to have a little better concentration, and you just do what you have to do. And the deck was pitching about 11 feet, so it was really rocking and rolling out there. There's a little bit of mist coming over the bow of the carrier, and it was very touchy, but I know that it felt good when I caught number 3 wire. We had 3 wires on that ship. Bigger ones have 5, and so.
Would that have been what you would say the worst landing experience you had on a carrier?
Yes. Those are, some of the memories that I have. We had in our squadron, by the time we left Moffett Field, we started with about 18 pilots. We lost Bill Ober, we lost Dave Goodall, we lost another one in the Philippines. We had one that lost his wings, he couldn't qualify. We had one that quit, and then before we went out on our cruise, and we had one that he was doing a cat shot, and on a cat shot you put your flaps all the way down and you put the throttle friction all the way up. Well, he put his flaps up and the throttle friction all the way back. So he goes off the end of the carrier, and his throttle flies back. He doesn't have any flaps, and he doesn't have any power. Well, he managed to keep the airplane in the air. He got his power back up, and he got his flaps down, and he probably had a little bit of mist on his windshield, but when he came back in and landed, he came in and turned in his wings. So we had quite a few out of the 18 that got us down to about 13. And that was kind of the way it was then. Other squadrons had similar, things that happened.
And why don't you get us aboard and tell us how you lived and how the aircraft was taken care of and what your assignments were, your missions, that sort of thing?
Well, you're going to have to listen to a little bit here, but yes. First thing I remember about the carrier was coming aboard with your luggage and getting the assignment of your room. And I was rooming with Wayne Cannell, who is still a good friend. And so we got kind of some directions on how to get to our cubicle. So we left our bags up on the flight deck, and we started looking. And we looked and we looked, and we got down this passageway and up this stairway and down that stairway and up this passageway. And finally we came out this opening where we thought we were about there, and it's right where we started. So we had to start all over. And ultimately we found the thing, but the carrier is really an interesting place to live. Another thing that had no air conditioning. And trying to sleep in a little room with no air conditioning, not too easy. And so a lot of us would just go out and try to find a place to sleep, maybe on a catwalk or somewhere. And I know that I went up on the forecastle, that's up on one of the decks below the flight deck, to the front of the ship where the anchor chains go out. There's an opening there, and the ship's going along about 20 knots, so you got a wind coming in there, and really, really kind of nice. You bring a blanket there and you sleep. Well, that was fine for one night. The next night I got up there was about 60 guys there. They'd heard about it, I guess, and there was no room. But of course, you ate in an officer's mess. You had a ready room where you spent most all of your time, where you did briefings and did all your work. Wayne Cannell, my good friend, was the registered publications officer, and I had been that before he was. I had a few months on him on rank, and so he was keeping his registered secret publications in a folder, and he put them under the seat in the ready room, and he lost them. And that was a bad day.
What do you mean by a registered publication? What's that involve?
Anything that's secret or top secret or confidential, and it has specialized handling. So, anything that is in that folder has to be locked up, should be. But Wayne was rather casual about some of those things, and he was, even when the commanding officer was chewing him out for something, he had a hard time keeping his face straight, it seemed like. And that wasn't my problem at all, boy. And that wasn't hardly anybody else's problem. But he was a Texas A&M football player. He played for Bear Bryant, and salty Texan, good guy, tremendous pilot. Operations off a carrier is one of the most fascinating and exciting things in the world. Anybody that, gets a chance to do that is just very blessed. That's the way I felt, and I think that's the way most of us felt. But, there may be boredom during the time that you're in the air, but there's never boredom at the beginning of the flight or the end of the flight. I mean, there's always some excitement sometime there. And the first landing, particularly with a jet, you're concentrating so much on doing it right and trying to get the number 2 wire and not make any mistakes, get aboard. You're not really thinking too much about safety. You're thinking about wanting to do it right. But boy, when you catch that hook, all of a sudden you get thrown against your chest, your seat belt, and it really is a shock. Then the plane captain starts moving you around to park. And the first time I parked that jet on a carrier, it just about scared me to death. Because he parked me up there in front of the island, and with my nose going out toward the starboard side, and I could look down and see the water, and he was telling me to come forward. And I thought, I'm not going to go forward. I'm going to go over the deck. But, you know, they crowd things, and things happen fast. We had a F-38 that messed up on his master armament switch, and when what did he do? Whenever he started to take off and get on the catapult, anyway, he shot off 2 rockets, and it started a fire, and things were happening awful fast around there. A fire on a ship is bad news, because they can really, you know, spread fast, and you see people get hurt, and you see, you know, things happening that are not nice. But things like that happened every now and then. We never had any big fires, but I remember that one. Another time, an F-3H went off and he lost power, and he splashed in front of the ship, and everybody was watching him. You could see him getting out of that, you know, airplane really fast, because they don't stay afloat very long. And
Just to kind of clarify something here, are you still flying the same types of planes, or are you flying a different plane at this point on the carrier?
well, the F-11F was the one I was flying on a carrier. We got that after we had the F-9, F-2s, and we were designated a fighter squadron after we got the F-11Fs. And all the time that I was on the carrier, I was flying the F-11F.
Okay. And one thing I don't think we addressed at this point is, which carrier are you on? How many planes are on it, and how big is this carrier?
Well, the USS Shangri-La is an attack-type carrier. It was one of the smallest attack carriers that were in service. It's no longer in service. The Midway, for instance, was quite a bit larger than the Shangri-La, but it's not as large as the super carrier. Our carrier was about 800 feet long, and the super carriers are 1,000 feet long, and they have all kinds of room to land. I mean, it's like having a landing field out there. These guys don't even know what it's like to, you know, have fun. So the Shangri-La was, you know, it was a World War II class carrier that they changed to an angled deck, and that was a huge advantage and advancement when the carriers became canted deck carriers. If you missed the wire, you didn't go into a big net. You just went around and you tried to land again. You just went right off the end, and they called that a bolter. And you had a lot of bolters where you missed a wire, your hook skipped, and go around and you try again. So the Shangri-La was an angle deck carrier. And
About how many planes, since this was a smaller carrier, about how many planes could you get aboard that?
well, each squadron had about 15 planes. There was a squadron of F-11Fs, a squadron of A-4s, a squadron of F-3Hs, a squadron of ADs, a squadron of A-6s. So right there you've got about 75, 80 airplanes. And then there's the A-3Ds and the helicopters and all plane they call a COD. It's just a twin-engine propeller plane that they use for mail and what have you, going back and forth off the ship. So there's 70, 80, 90 planes on a carrier at any given time.
On an 800-foot carrier, and you're taking jets off an 800 feet and landing.
Right.
You have to get up to speed in a hurry on that, and kind of describe the catapult and what that effect is like.
No, it's kind of fun. You follow directions of a plane captain and a deck crew that directs you up where the catapult is, and then they tie you. There's a hook on the airplane that hooks to the catapult. Of course, it releases as soon as you go off the end, but you're given the tune-up or turn-up signal, and as soon as they see you've got 100% power, they give you a signal and you salute, and they shoot you off. You go from 0 to 120 in about 110 feet.
The guy that went off the front of the carrier, you said he was trying to get out quickly. Did he survive? And what
Oh,
happens
yes.
to those planes when they go off the front?
Well, they're gone. None of the planes that were in service while I was there could be expected to. You couldn't expect to survive a landing in the water, and I think that the F4 or F3H, which he was flying, had a great big wing, and of course he wasn't up to full speed, but. He had a cold cat shot, and he landed right in front of the ship, and ship veered and missed him, and he didn't have very much time, but he got out of there. We were watching him. Man, he was scrambling, but a lot of ways to not come home, I'll tell you that. And you got, of course, the ship is going about 20 miles an hour, and you might have a wind that's about 15, 20 knots. So the actual speed over the deck is maybe only 80 or 90 knots, but it's a pretty good shot in the back. There were two types of catapults. We had a steam catapult, and they have a pretty even acceleration. The older hydraulic catapults used to really bang the guys in the back. They were a lot more violent, but they functioned pretty well. And then same thing with the arresting wires. They're hooked up to machines just below the deck, and they work it so when the plane lands, it maintains a straight course. It doesn't veer off to the left or right, and they work quite well. I hope that explains it well enough for you.
The other thing that I kind of gathered from what you were talking about with the accidents that happened is that the people who seem to be in as much danger were your deck crew, your landing officers, and talk a little bit about them.
Well, they are. I mean, other than the fact that planes crash and go, skidding up the deck into them and exploding sometimes. I mean, just walking around on that deck is it's pretty dangerous. I mean, I had to go down to the what do you call it, the doctor's office on the ship after I had I knocked a wheel off a plane one time when I landed, and there was a deck crewman that had reacted to this one rocket that went off on this airplane, and he ducked under a wing of an AD, and he forgot about the bomb rack on there, and he ran into it with his head, and he had a great big cut on his head. And just the fact around propellers, they're around a fairly slick deck, there are cables, there are a lot of things that can hurt them, and they have to be really careful, and they do a good job. And there weren't that many injuries on our ship, but you know, everybody's heard about the kid that walks into a propeller and ends his days. We did have a crew member that walked too close to an F-11F one time when it was turning up, and it sucked him into the exhaust. I mean, into the intake, and he was killed. So things happen pretty fast.
Bill, why are you there? What are the missions involved? What are you doing? What's the
Well,
purpose?
the mission is, well, when I was out, there were no hostilities, particularly. Chinese nationalists were fighting the Chinese communists in the Taiwan Straits, and there were air battles going on, and we were doing fighter sweeps up and down those straits and anticipating possibly meeting some Russian MiGs flown by Chinese or Russians, and we never did. But the mission is to maintain training in event any hostilities occur, or to react to any kind of aggression or hostilities. So, you know, it's...
Would you call that a readiness type?
Yes. Yeah, to be ready in an event, you know, you have to go into a hostile action. And we never did have to. We carried Sidewinders. That was a heat-seeking missile that was fairly new, very accurate. One of our tests was to hit a flare that was on the wingtip of an F-6F, an old World War II plane. And that Sidewinder knocked that flare off, didn't hurt the airplane at all. I mean, they're very accurate. They go right up a tailpipe. And what they have now is way advanced from what we had. But what we had was way advanced from what they had earlier. So it keeps getting better and better.
You want to describe to us how long your tour duty was? And
Well, we were out on the ocean 10 months, and we would stop at various different seaports. The main one was Yokosuka, Japan, and we went to Iwakuni, we went to Hiroshima, we went down to the Philippines. We lost a pilot down in the Philippines at Cuby Point Naval Air Station, and we were up around Korea. So in 10 months, we didn't stay out over about 6 weeks at a time. So we had a pretty nice cruise. You know, get to see the shows in Japan and what have you. Had a lot of fun there. Wonderful cruise, wonderful experience. And in December of '58, I got out of the Navy. I stayed in the reserves, and I flew for another 12 years. And then 4 years after that, I went to Naval Reserve Officer School, where you just took classes and got credit for being there. One of the times I went out to a reserve officers meeting where we were just taking classes, they didn't have the curriculum that they expected to, so they said, well, we will just show you a movie this time about what's going on in Southeast Asia. And I thought, well, that ought to be fun. And well, they're saying, now here's an F-4 Phantom squadron, and the commanding officer is about to brief his pilots on a mission. And here comes the commanding officer, it's Wayne Cannell. And I had no idea he was, a commander of an F-4 squadron at that time. And I did get a letter from him later, and he said he had just completed his 147th combat mission. And that's a lot of time over enemy territory and a lot of traps and a lot of catapults.
How long did it take you to reach the rank of lieutenant commander?
I was in the reserves. I think I had been in the Navy 12, 13 years by then. And eventually I retired Navy Reserve.
Does it take a different breed of pilot to be a carrier pilot other than just a normal pilot?
Oh, I think most pilots that I've met, number one, they love what they're doing. And if there are any hostilities, they are eager to go. They want to prove, they want to be involved. They don't want to be left out. And there are some that are not cut out to be it. But by the time you get through training and you've done, I don't know how many hundred FCLPs, that's practice landings on a field, practice carrier landings on a field, you just want to do it. And it's just really exciting, a lot of fun. I mean, carrier operations is fascinating. It's great. It was a high honor, very high honor. Yeah. No, I was blessed, I think, to get to do that.